Okay, sounds good. Sí, sí, ladies and gentlemen, bienvenidos. Sí, mira, check this out. The Bible, see, in James 1, verses 2 and 3 says this: Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kind, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. See, James, thank you again so much for staying with us here in the Next Step show, sir. Absolutely. And you know, I did it earlier, and I do want to take a second to say thank you, sir, for your service. Listen, serving in the Marines is no joke, and any of our services. So thank you so much for everything that you did and do. So James, let's start with the big picture. See, I mean, you're making an argument that acting tools can truly make a difference in things like personal development or emotional intelligence, really, which has been kind of the focus for me. Can you tell us? I mean, tell us what that means. Interesting. You know, I completely agree. Can I? I want to ask something in regards to what we're seeing going on in society today, because you mentioned about how we teach our youth to well, I mean, for lack of a better term, to man up, I guess, or in the case of a girl or a woman, that's what we talk about. But there seems to be a different narrative in society today where it's shifted to the other side, where it is more platitudes, but they've almost done away with the platitude, making statements like, "Mira, I understand you got a tough issue here, but let's work together and get beyond it. and let's use everything that's in front of us as our tools. That they don't preach that anymore. Can your plan or your idea work in situations like that to start shifting our culture to more of a sustainable culture, right? Believing in oneself, stuff like that. Hmm. That is true. However, I'm going to push back a little bit on that, James, and say, especially with politicians, they have, I believe that politicians have learned the art of acting and have used it kind of like you mentioned earlier, to create this systemic approach. Well, like I said, to shift our culture from what we were to what they want now, which is kind of controlling the minds. Would you agree with that in any way? Yes. And I'll tell you, imagine if we did take the time. I remember in high school, they had classes like home economics, for example. And even though it wasn't directly in, hey, let's learn about your emotions, but understanding the skills that was coming out of a class like that allowed you to, one, experience various emotions that you're probably not used to, especially as a guy. And more so, it teaches you how to recognize, like you said, but they pulled all that out of school. Is there any correlation between sports and acting? I mean, I know like football players, I've heard that they take things like ballet lessons, not just to help them with their moves and flexibility, but also to help them with their, well, being in the present, their focus, yeah, their balance emotionally and, in their bodies. Everything you listed is like foundational for an entrepreneur. It's foundational for a parent. It's foundational for successful students. It almost seems too obvious, James. Yes. So, I'm a strong believer that the issue that we have in our nations is culture, right? Not so much policy wise. I think the culture shift is a result of the policies. But when we get back, James, I want to talk a little bit about this operating system concept of the computer system and how we can reprogram that. See? Ladies and gentlemen, soy yo, the conservative New Rican. We'll be right back right here on the WYSL station, Si La Voz de Libertad, en unos minutos. No cambie ese dial. I couldn't hear you. Ahí sí, mira, Bob, let that play for like 10 seconds. See, mira, ladies and gentlemen, get in the groove, let that stress go because we're approaching Friday. Mira, move that body to these beats. Ahí sí, por seguro. Mira, welcome back to the Next Step Show, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored, right? I am honored to have on the phone el señor James Rojas-Taylor. Sir, thank you. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, this guy is a Marine. And you know that old saying, once a Marine, always a Marine. And mira, he's also an author, and we'll get to that here in a second. James, thank you again. A question for you. Before break, I talked about culture. And we see all these politicians talking about things like we're going to do a policy for this and we're going to put $1 million for that and all this other stuff, right? But when it's those policies that created the problem. Now, earlier you mentioned that our minds are like a computer system, right? Computer systems have operating systems, which, in my opinion, in that scenario, would be our souls, right? How can acting or acting techniques and applying that into our everyday life, right? How can that help someone reprogram that operating system so that one, they have emotional intelligence, they have discernment so that they could hear the words and not get caught up in the hyperbole? Interesting. So let's look at that a little deeper. I want to, you know what it is, James. Especially, and I don't know how it is in Alabama, but aquí in New York State, they leaders, right? They outright lie these days. I mean, it's gotten interesting up here, and it's not Republican or Democrat. It's both of them, right? It's all of them. I mean, there's like a handful of elected officials that I can say, wow. But check this out, though, sir. These guys here, they keep getting elected election over election, and some of them have been there for decades. So for our listeners, can you give us or help us understand how is it that we could use these techniques, like and actually apply them? Because we are so busy, and frankly, I think that's part of the design, right? Keep us busy, keep us distracted, kind of stuff. So how can we use these to be able to look at somebody and really be able to know if they're talking authentically or not? I mean, what tricks are there for that? Mhm. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Right. Can I ask you? Well, I could totally see how it's easy to be able to use those skills to manipulate as well. The studies show that communication is 90%, or yeah, 90% what we see and 10% what we actually hear. Um, so I have to assume that this plan is kind of leveraging those kind of statistics, right? So that we're talking more with our body than we are. I mean, am I along the right lines with that? Right. Spiritual shape-shifting. You had that listed as something that you promoted. Okay, what is that? I mean, I gotcha. Okay. So is there any type of religious connotation to that or faith-based connotation to that concept? Very nice. So, sir, I want to go down a path here. It's going to be a little political, but I want to take this plan, this concept that you have, and see if we can create a visual of it as to how it would be in practice. Okay. And I want to kind of reference President Trump's address, the one that he did the other day to Congress. Did you get a chance to watch it or anything? Okay. Any of the highlights? Yeah, okay, bummer. What I wanted to do was use that as an example to be able to see your reaction. Sure. Basically, they had it was the day before yesterday, or the day before yesterday. He did a joint session of Congress where he presented his plan, and like every politician, he touted that we won and how great we won, and then he went on to talk about his plan. At one point, Representative Al Green, who's now censured by Congress, had stood up. It was probably within the first 10 minutes, I'd have to say, in the midst of Trump talking about some of the successes he's had in policy wise for small businesses, and then this Al Green, who is black, who is a Democrat, got up and started screaming, yelling, protesting, I guess. With that, there were situations throughout the evening where, for example, there was one young kid, again, another black kid, and I'm gonna tell you why I'm using the race here for a minute because this seems to be part of the image that's being portrayed, right? And and he had left before that, but the left side, the Democrats didn't even stand up. But Amita, I'm going to go to break. When we get back, think about that for a second. I'd like your reaction, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, yep, right here in the next step show. Remember, you can catch us on all social medias. So you're the conservative New York. I'll be right back right here in the Cambia Dial. Very little, if I hear you at all. Yeah, it's sounding like it did before the engineer came. No. Yep, por seguro. Mira, it is a family affair. And no, I don't mean just mommy, papi, and no, I don't mean just my abuelos and abuelitas and all that. I mean us. I mean we the people. I mean, guess what? God country family. Welcome back to the Next Step Show. Sí, como dije ahorita, sí, yo tengo, right? I'm going to go there, right? I have the Honorable James Rojas-Taylor, right? A guy who's thinking, a guy who has a plan for a better tomorrow. James, you are an amazing individual. I love everything. I mean, the fact that you have taken the time to sit there and truly think about how can I use my experiences to better me, but then you shared it. That's leadership, Papa. Absolutely. So before break, I explained a little bit about and I don't want to spend too much time on this, sir. It's not the purpose of the call, or where we stand politically or anything like that. But what I'm wondering, based on what I described, right, and I used the race, right. I talked about the little black boy and the black representative because um, there seems to be a lot of chatter about black and white. I mean, yeah, like this divisive type of chatter on both sides of the aisle, right? So how can right or can you give us kind of like an example of a skill that we could use to look at something like that, see the theatrics behind it, because really that's what it is, and then how to analyze it so we can make better use. What acting skill would we be able to apply for that, I guess? Mhm. Yeah. Abs Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up because, one of the things that I'm proud of, one of the things that I do on my show is really try to help individuals find their balance between faith, politics, and entrepreneurship, whatever that means to them, but finding that balance, but always understanding that the first corporation within that entrepreneurship model that we have to build is ourselves. Because if we don't do that, we can't see what's in front of. We don't see the dangers. Absolutely, James. I mentioned earlier that you are an author. Can you tell us a little bit about the books or able whatever books you've written? What are they called? Where we can get them, and why should we read them? You call them intangible tools? Yeah. James, I may have to borrow that phrase. I really like that. That is a perfect description of because and again, not to get religious here, but I do believe, right, that when we were created, that we were given everything that we need to survive and prosper within our own selves and in the world. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So listen, Jim, we're approaching the end of the show. If you don't mind taking the next minute or so and just kind of share with our listeners how can they get involved, how can they learn more about you, where can they buy your book, and if you don't mind, I like to call them next steps advice for our listeners. Mhm. Absolutely. And next steps advice? Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Honorable James Rojas-Taylor. Sir, I truly appreciate you. I truly appreciate your time. And I look forward to having you again on the show in the near future. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. Thank you again. I appreciate that. See, ladies and gentlemen, aquí on the Next Step show, it's all about learning. It's all about news commentary, too, right? It's all about highlighting what it is, right, that you can do so that you can look around at those news clips, so that you can listen to Hocus Pocus and truly see the magic, right, or the magic trick that she's doing. It'll give you the opportunity to sit there and be like, Mira, I'm going to hold you accountable. And this is why I can guarantee you that here in the Next Step show, right, we will hold accountable. We will teach. Y mira, I'll tell you what, if you're looking to sponsor a phenomenal program, right? 585-346-3000. Just be like, Mira, Bob, I want to sponsor the Next Step show. Be a leader, be a leader, be a leader. Y no te olvides, see, always say it. God bless these United States of America. And mira, como digo, don't let a millisecond go by where you, see, too, are not a voice for liberty. Hasta mañana. You too.